Hello and welcome to ISC Sociology online video lectures. Dear children, today we will look at the topic called Culture Contact and its Impact. Continuing with the chapter on tribes, where we were dealing with the topic called dormitories, today we will observe the various factors behind the disappearance of dormitories. In our previous sessions, we looked at the reasons behind the origin of dormitories, why this informal institution was set up in the tribal societies. But you must have noticed over the years that many of these tribal societies do not have such institutions in the present day. Moreover, you must have also noticed that most of these tribal areas today have schools. They do have educational institutions. Tribal children go to proper formal schools, and most of the forests and jungles today are becoming totally urbanized. Therefore, today in this topic, which you will find in page 5.6 in your textbooks, page 5.6 in your textbook contains the topic called Culture Contact and its Impact. We will look at the various factors and causes behind the disappearance of this institution called dormitory. Just to make it easier for you children, instead of reading and explaining from the textbook, today I have picked up these points. You can see on the board for yourself. I have picked up these points here, which will become easier for you, all right, especially for me to explain and for you to write down your answers if at all it comes as a long question for 5 marks. Whenever you get long questions out of 5 marks in your examination, make sure to write down in point form, just as the way it is shown on the board. These will be your topics or subtopics, and you can build up on them, you can develop on these points, you can write at least 4 to 5 lines on these topics, and this is exactly how you are supposed to write down your answers. So let's begin with the first factor. As I told you, why the dormitories have disappeared from tribal society. The first factor I have written is due to the influence of non-tribal culture. The tribal groups are generally found in the forests, jungles, uninhabited areas, in the islands. Sometimes you find them in the coastal areas and higher mountainous regions. Wherever the population is less, these are the areas which are inhabited by the tribal groups. So long time ago, in these tribal areas, you did find dormitories which were training centers for young boys and girls. But if you look at the case of India, after independence, that is post-independence 1947, once India became free and we were away from the clutches of the British Empire, a lot of developmental activities started coming into these areas. So what happened was, the tribal areas now were slowly being encroached by another group. I will circle the word here. Another group called non-tribal group. Many of these groups started going into these areas, building houses, started with agriculture, domesticating animals, and once the tribal group, they started looking at, now they have neighbors, now they have friends. Once they started looking at the non-tribal culture. Now, what are the features of non-tribal culture? I will start with the food, the dress, all right, the language, etc. Let's start with the food. Most of the tribes used to gather food from the jungles. They used to eat it raw. all right? They never used to cook it or wash it. They used to gather all kinds of fruits and nuts and berries from the jungle, hunting wild animals, trapping the birds, mouse, killing snakes. This was the food of the tribals. When they looked at the non-tribals always cooked their food, washed it properly, cleaned it, all right? And most of the time it was prepared on the fire, all right, using utensils. Therefore, when they looked at the civilized group, some of them felt that we should also change our lifestyle, our ways of living, and they also started now cooking food. Talking about the dress, most of the tribals are half clad, half naked, right? Whereas the non-tribal people were dressed very, very properly, very tidily, very sensibly also. That's where again they felt embarrassed looking their dressing sense, and now they also started imbibing the dressing sense of the non-tribal culture. The non-tribes also had their own gods and goddesses. They had their own religion, right? Whereas the tribal people were engaged in ancestor worship. They were engaged in totemism, where they considered certain fruits, certain animals and plants as the ancestors. So when they compared their culture and the culture of the non-tribal people, they felt that they are backward. They felt that they are not civilized. So in order, right, to show that they have changed, in order to upgrade the social status in the society, the tribal people slowly gave up the dormitory system. That is what most of us also do. We always compare ourselves with the West, and we feel that the Western culture is an ideal culture, the most perfect culture. That's why most of us feel that talking in English and wearing Western clothes and adapting to Western lifestyle is supposed to be the best. The same thing also happened with the tribal people. When they came in contact with non-tribal culture, they were influenced by it, and then slowly they started giving up their own cultures and ways of living. This might be one of the factors behind the disappearance of dormitories. The second one is religious conversion. In India, a lot of missionary activities also started taking place later on. The missionaries who came from the West to spread the message of God started constructing churches, schools, dispensaries in all these rural and the village or the forest areas which were cut off from the mainstream society. So when these missionaries came, they started again, all right, sort of talking to these tribal people, and they also built their own homes over there, started educating the tribal children, started building missionary schools. So what happened is, most of the tribals, they now started converting to either Christianity. This was one religion which was liked by most of the tribes, because instead of saying that I have my own tribal religion, right, some of them were ashamed to talk about the gods, right, whereas here you had proper religious beliefs, you had textbooks, right, to refer to. So these people felt that converting to a different religion would also add to their social status. It is better to call yourself a Hindu. It is better to call yourself a Buddhist. It's not only Christianity. It is better to call yourself a Jain rather than calling yourself a tribal or an Adivasi or Vanvasi or Vanyajati. They felt that the status was in associating yourself with a modern religion. So when you convert to modern religion, Most of these modern religions will not allow you to dance and drink and make merry all night. Most of these religions do have morality backed, alright, and therefore they will not allow the girls and boys to move around freely, to wake up late till night and then to just have fun and frolic all the way. They do have some religious sanctions as well. So maybe these religious sanctions, do's and don'ts, don't drink, don't dance whole night, wear proper clothes, alright, girls and boys are not supposed to stay together. This could also be the reason behind the disappearance of the dormitories. Talking about the third one is socio-economic movements. Slowly and steadily, most of these tribes now started comparing themselves with the urban communities, especially in the cities. Like today, if you compare cities like Delhi, Bombay, Hyderabad, Calcutta and all that, they are very much developed. You have good roads over there, plenty of opportunities for employment, for education, health. Everything is better off in the urban areas. But if you look at these rural, today also in India, if you go into the interiors of the forest, you will find tribal communities who have still not seen a road. You will still see tribal communities who have not even visited a health center or have seen a school in their lives. So, at one point of time, many social movements started, right, from these tribal areas. Like, for example, today also we see in Chhattisgarh, the Maoist movement is going on in Chhattisgarh. Chhattisgarh is an area inhabited by lots of tribes. In Manipur also we saw many of these movements. Mizoram we saw many of these tribal movements. All these movements are talking about the upliftment of tribes. They also want status. They also want some kind of security from the Indian government. They also want good roads, schools, colleges, universities, hospitals to come up in these areas. Therefore, when these movements came up, it disrupted the peace of that particular place. When this kind of disruption or disturbance came, this could be the result that dormitories disappeared, and then later on many formal schools and educational institutions must have come up. So today I have explained these 3 points. In my next lecture, I will explain point number 4 and point number 5. Thank you for watching.